Welcome back to Myth, Magic, and Movies, the series where we take a look at movies through a horror lens. And today, we're going to be asking the question, who is Dracula, the famous Transylvanian count as depicted in the eponymous novel by Bram Stoker? And we're going to be looking at 4 movies, and we'll be discussing which of these movies best portrays the count. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. We are slowly growing our channel, so we encourage everybody to hit that subscribe button, stay up to date for the latest episode drops. And for those watching, thank you so much for tuning in, and let's dive in. So I couldn't really have this discussion without having someone who is an expert in vampiric lore, and who better to educate us on vampires than the aficionado himself, Mr. Bradley Smith, co-host of the Story Proof podcast. Sir, how are you doing today on this fine Saturday afternoon in the daytime?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm very excited to talk about this. I think the topic is really cool. I think the movies we're going to talk about, I really enjoy all of them. And
I'm even wearing my Nosferatu t-shirt too. So
yeah, I'm excited. I really like all the movies that we're talking about. I think they're very good picks for looking at the idea of Dracula as a character, as a symbol, the progression, the different versions of him. I think we picked some really good topics for this.
Well, another thing too is because, you know, a lot of people probably say, well, why didn't you just pick the Bela Lugosi one? And my answer to that is it's very obvious, because the Bela Lugosi incarnation of Dracula is so iconic. I mean, when you think of Dracula, you think of, you know, the cape, the suit, and the red ribbon. And I guarantee you, if you go to any Halloween store in October, when you ask for a vampire costume, you're going to get the Bela Lugosi costume. So I figured it's just too easy. If I selected that, it would have been a one-sided conversation. It wouldn't be very interesting.
Yeah.
So Bradley, real quickly, you are a huge vampire fan. Can you tell us a little bit about why you're fascinated with these blood-sucking creatures of the night?
So it's funny because it comes back to one movie. I grew up in we grew up in the era of video stores, and I remember the movie cover for the movie Underworld. And I wanted to watch that when I was a kid so badly. I'm like, there are vampires, there are werewolves, this is what's up. And for years, my mom was like, no, it's rated R, you're too young. And I was it was one of those things you tell a kid, no, of course, that's the thing they want to do more than anything.
Yeah, no means yes, basically.
Yeah. So I was like so obsessed with this idea from a very young age. Finally got to watch it. I do enjoy it. And you know, it never failed that every time I would watch a vampire movie, so often I'd be like, God, this really hits. I really enjoy this. And, you know, a big fan of horror movies. I love like monster movies. So this is already getting a bit towards that. But there are certain types, like, you know, like zombie movies are a dime a dozen. I think there's maybe one out of every like 50 zombie movies that I think is really good. But it was just consistently vampire movies just really did it for me. I like the idea of vampires. I like all the different versions of them. I also grew up with Blade, which was a very, you know, Marvel character vampire thing. So I was like, this also really spoke to me at a younger age. And then honestly, I remember being in, I think like a Goodwill and finding Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was like a second publication. Like this book was so old, and unfortunately I don't have it anymore. I really wish I did. But I remember reading Dracula and Frankenstein when I was in high school and being genuinely surprised at how good they were, because historically I have a habit of people really talk something up and then I see it or read it, watch it, whatever, and I'm like, it's fine, it's not bad, but people really blew it up bigger than they meant to or should have. But no, Dracula and Frankenstein, dude, they really hold up. So I just find myself enjoying pretty much any vampire related thing I've come across in my life.
Well, I was gonna say, because vampires are kind of like the Hamlet of horror, if you think about it, because no two actors are gonna play, you know, the same vampire the same way, right? Yeah. And with the selections of movies that we've looked at and that we have in store to talk about, it's so amazing to see just how different they portray the same character. So for our viewers, we're going to be looking at 4 movies today. We're going to be looking at Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, Van Helsing from 2004, Last Voyage of the Demeter from 2023, and then Robert Eggers' classic Nosferatu. So let's go ahead and dive in. So Bram Stoker's Dracula. So when I was in college, when I was studying film, there was an option to take a film class, and this was junior year, so like 2009, 2010. And one of the movies we watched was Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it brought back so many memories. Because I remember watching. You remember that show Movie Magic on
Yes.
on Discovery? There was this one episode that I watched, and it scared the shit out of me for weeks on end. And it's the scene where we see Lucy as a vampire coming down the stairs.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, well, how we achieved the trick was she basically had to walk backwards, and then we extinguished the candles, as she went up, and then we just basically did a reversal. But the scene that really freaked me out was when Van Helsing holds the crucifix and she just spews blood in his face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I just go to my mom. I'm like, Mom, I know I'm in second grade, but can I sleep with you tonight? Like, it was so terrifying. But let's go ahead and dive in because there's no better way to kick off our discussion of Dracula than to talk about one of the greatest roles performed by one of the greatest actors ever.
Oh yeah,
Gary Oldman. So Bradley, you are the vampire aficionado. You are the guest. I will go ahead and give the floor to you to go ahead and just lay it on us. Let us know what your thoughts are about how Gary Oldman portrayed the Transylvanian Count.
So I will go ahead and preface this by saying this is going to sound really bad. This is, of the four movies, the one I'm the least familiar with. I actually just watched this for the first time maybe 2 or 3 years ago, because people kept making fun of Keanu Reeves' accent, and
it's one of those movies. It's one of those movies where they show two actors who should never ever in their career ever do accents. Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder. So.
Yep. And I had heard about that. I knew about it. I had seen images of Gary Oldman with the big like hairpiece, and just being like, okay, it looks okay, but I realized after a while, I was like, other than making fun of the accent, I don't really hear people talk badly about this movie. So maybe I should give it a watch. This, I would say that the Bela Lugosi version is like the definitive, what we think of as Dracula. It's, of the age that it came out, how iconic it is, how well made the movie is. It is very hard to think of anyone else or any other version as the definitive version. But I think if you had to give a second option, I do think this would be the second option.
And I was gonna say, because even when Christopher Lee took on the role, like the outfit he was wearing was still channeling Bela Lugosi. So it wasn't too much of a departure. They were still playing it pretty safe back then. So So what Francis Ford Coppola did with Gary Oldman's Dracula was pretty much a departure from convention at that time.
Yeah, he still had a certain bit of the like flamboyantness that you have with Dracula, but he wasn't there are so many things that we tend to think of as like cheesy, and you think of like the cape. It's so easy to be like, oh, that's a cheesy thing, but so often things become that way because we've seen them done really well and they get done multiple times. So if you go back to the beginning, this is gonna be a weird tangent, but when I look back at the Lugosi Dracula, it's so easy to be like, dude, he's walking around in a cape. How is that not ridiculous? But back then that was just so iconic, and we still look back and it's so iconic. I really do think the Gary Oldman version is a very nice, at the time, maybe a bit closer to a modern interpretation of it, where he's not necessarily walking around with the cape and acting the same way that Bela Lugosi did, but he's still, I agree. Gary Oldman is, in my humble opinion, I would say probably the greatest actor alive.
Well, I was going to say too, because the way that he dresses himself, this is someone who he's not bringing attention to himself. He's very self-effacing because to your point with Bela Lugosi, him walking around the cape, it is bound to turn heads. People are going to look at him and say, "What the hell is that guy doing?" Right? Yeah. But when you look at the way that Gary Oldman portrays Dracula, when he's in his native environment in Transylvania, he kind of allows himself to be more at home, be more true to who he is, right?
Yeah.
So so the pale feature, the beehive hair, the mom hairdo, as I call it, the robe and everything, that seems to suit more of who he was as a person before he became a vampire. And then when he goes into London, he becomes a chameleon. He kind of adapts himself more to the surroundings. And I think that and I think that's pretty interesting too, because when we think of Dracula, we think of of an undead creature who like stalks his prey and drinks blood and is a terror to everybody.
Mhm.
But we tend to forget that he's also human.
Yep.
What did you think about the intro? Because the intro to the movie, when I first saw it, I found it a bit jarring, because that was never in the original, and I thought. At the time, I thought Coppola kind of took a lot of liberties with it, but when I watched it a few days ago, I thought he definitely wants to remind us that this isn't someone who's pure evil. This is someone who we can sort of sympathize with, even if we don't agree with what he's doing.
Yeah, and I really think that speaks a lot to what you just mentioned about remembering that there is a human aspect to this character. This particular version of Dracula, I like the idea that, and honestly, most versions of Dracula, there are times where is he a good person? Versions, some yes, some no, mostly no, but there are very few versions of Dracula where I view him and I'm like, this dude is just evil. Like, sometimes he does bad things. I mean, obviously, being a vampire, there is a certain level of you have to consume people in order to continue your life. So there's something very innate of a bad thing about that. But I definitely feel like the intro really brings in a lot of the humanism to the character that we get to see throughout the rest of the film, and we are going to speak about some later on, where this isn't the animalistic side. This is much more based on the human side of the character.
Right.
And God, Gary Oldman just does such a good job with it. This is such a good role for him, because he gets to be, I just feel like the peak Gary Oldman. Like, he gets to do what he does so well. He disappears in the role. He's still got a lot of the flamboyantness. He's very suave as well. He carries himself very well. One thing I will also say is, I'm a big theater person. There is a musical, Dracula the musical, and the music was written by Frank Wildhorn. And there is a song in there where he's talking about how I need to go to London because where I currently am, their defenses are strong. He's like, I can't really do what I want to do here anymore because they know who I am. They know how to combat me. I need to go to London. I need to do TFO, greener pastures and whatnot. So it is, there is a good point to be made about how when he goes to a new place, he disappears into the new environment, and we really get to see kind of the beginnings of what he probably would have done in Transylvania once upon a time, but now it's been to a point where people know him and know his game. Yeah. And I really like that this movie, you get to see a lot more of the human side of it, but then you still also get to see the ridiculous over the topness of it as well.
Well, that also brings up another point too, and you actually mentioned it quite beautifully. It's the fact that that this Dracula is very much migrating to a new place where, belief in the supernatural kind of takes a back seat, because because as we'll discuss in Nosferatu later on, where he's living at right now is very much steeped in the old ways, as they would say. So to migrate to a new world where where he can sort of blend in, I would say kind of speaks to the innate human desire to want to find a place to belong and sort of just reinvent yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think regardless if you're living or undead, I think it's very much a human quality that you can never really shake off. So to see so another aspect that I find really interesting, and it's something that we really don't see in the other Dracula movies, because in the other Dracula movies, he's very much motivated by lust. Here, the relationship that he has with Mina, it's motivated by genuine love, because we see from the very beginning she's this I'm presuming she's a reincarnation of Elizabeth.
That's how I read it. That's how I have interpreted that, as that she is the reincarnation of his first love.
but that's the thing too, because like I said, I mean, Gary Oldman gives us a very human Dracula, because not only do we see who he was as a person, but we also see what his motivations are, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, whatever your thoughts are about murdering innocent people and drinking their blood, or having having to do like horrible things, at the same time you could sort of feel for the guy, because as much as you want to say, dude, you really shouldn't go there because it's taboo, you kind of get the feeling that this is a guy who will do anything for love, right? To quote a Meatloaf song, I'll do anything for love, but I will do that too. um, so I wanted to get your take. What were your thoughts on Dracula's obsession with Mina Harker? Did you feel? I mean, did you feel like that sort of accentuated who he was as a person, sort of like brought out a little bit of his humanity, or did you feel a little bit repulsed? Did you feel that love kind of got perverted over the ages?
I think there's a niceness to how like obsessed he is, and it's really like when you first meet him, he is, well, not in the intro section, when we first meet like the regular story. It is like as soon as he has the idea that he, is in love with someone, as soon as his attention is on that person, dude, it is like he is zoned in. He is going to go for it. Absolutely. Whatever he wants, whatever he has to do, he'll absolutely pursue it. There is, I think, in a nice, not the stalker side of it, but in the in the maybe obsession was the bad word, but the focus of like having the feelings for that one person and just absolutely fervently going after it. There is something kind of nice about that.
Yeah.
He just so happens to be a vampire. I mean, no one's perfect, but there is something I think that is surprisingly nice about that in a sweet way.
It's kind of relatable in a weird way too, if you think about it.
And I never thought about it until I had one of my friends that she was dating this guy, and she's like, I just like how much he wants to be with me, how it's just so clear of how much he wants to be in a relationship with me. And I was like, God, that seems surprisingly relatable to this, where you do just have the laser focus on Mina, wanting to go after Mina, and just being so absolutely infatuated head over heels for this person that it's almost like everything else disappears around you. I feel like that is about as human as you're going to get. I mean, that is something I think we can all relate to. And I do enjoy that. I think that's a really good version of the human side of this, because we're talking about 3 additional movies. We really only get that, I feel like, in one other movie of the 3 that we're talking about. So I think in this case, it's really nice to get to, again, play into the very human aspect of the character. And I actually had this thought when I was doing a bit of research and rewatching for this episode, is, we tend to think of vampires as bad, as evil, because they kill and eat people, or not eat, but some versions, but they do, kill and drink the blood of people. We view that as evil, but it kind of hit me. We do the same thing to animals.
That's true.
It really is just a different shade of the same kind of it. I'm not saying vampires are good. It really hit me in that time. I'm like, the innate thing that we think about vampires being evil is just because of what they are and how they have to survive. But, we do the same thing. It's just that for us, we're not killing people.
Well, I would go so far as to say the process is removed, right?
Yeah.
So we're not actually witnessing the process by which we obtain our food, as opposed to with what vampires do. It's very visceral. It's very much in real time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, at the end of the movie, you kind of get the feeling that there's closure, right? And you feel like, in a way, Dracula kind of comes to accept his end, because he has sort of accomplished what he's wanted from the very beginning. Everything comes full circle at the end.
Yeah. And I thought the ending scene in this is really nice. Again, though, because the musical, I will say, Dracula the musical, my favorite musical. It's so good. Oh my God, I want to see it. I want to be in it so bad. But at the end of it, there's this wonderful thing where they're singing. He and Mina are singing back and forth, and he's like, "If you truly love me, you have to free me." And he's saying, "You have to kill me." And she's like, "No, I don't want to," because of course. But there's this like, it's so darkly beautiful. at the end of this that they get to share this final moment before she is ultimately the one that kills him.
Yeah, and you get that sense from watching the interaction between Mita and Dracula in that movie.
Yeah,
because
it's a very cathartic ending.
Right, because she develops that connection with Dracula near the end, and even though Van Helsing's trying to stop her, he also understands, hey, maybe we need to just let this play out.
Yeah.
As a result. But speaking of Van Helsing, I want to move into the 2004 movie with Hugh Jackman. And I was going to say, I thought this movie was pretty interesting because when we think of Dracula, we normally think of the vampire, the eponymous character.
Mhm.
But here we're focusing on his foil, Van Helsing, or in this case, Gabriel Van Helsing.
Mhm.
And you mentioned Kate Beckinsale earlier, so
Yep.
here's your chance to fanboy out on Kate Beckinsale in her steampunk tights. Now with Dracula, I would say out of all of the characters, we're getting someone who's a bit more of a campy villain type of character.
Yeah.
And I was going to say too, because Underworld came out in what, 2003, roughly around that time period.
I know it's early 2000s.
Yeah, so the whole narrative that you see in the movie, I felt like they're pretty much lifting from Underworld because of the whole, only a werewolf can kill Dracula.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your thoughts of the portrayal of Dracula in Van Helsing.
So I would go ahead and say, polar opposite of the last one, this is easily the one of these movies I've watched the most by a landslide. Love this movie.
You're in good company, by the way.
Yeah, dude. Growing up, my family was very much into like PG-13 action movies. I mean, that's what we watched.
Mhm.
This one was right up my alley. There are a number of actors in this that I really enjoy. I mean, you got Faramir in it. I'm a Lord of the Rings diehard fan. That's gonna win me over. But I definitely say would agree that this version of Dracula is he's the villain. He is the antagonist very clearly. There is no wiggle room about it. Even towards the end when he starts to try to be like, no, we shouldn't fight. We could be friends. But then he immediately transforms and starts attacking.
Right.
He's like, come on, man. But no, this one, he's very campy is a really good word. This is also the only, or sorry, not the only, but this is one of the movies where we actually get to see the brides as well. I like that they are such prominent characters. This one really gets to play into like the powers of Dracula. We get to see the transformations. We get to see all of the powers that he has and that his brides have. We get to see a lot of big fights. Seriously, if you have not watched this movie, big recommend. This one's a good time.
Well, I was gonna say, if you haven't seen the movie by this point, my question is, what the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah, dude. I mean, seriously, Hugh Jackman has an automatic crossbow. Like,
well, I was gonna say because it comes on every October. Almost every channel is gonna show Van Helsing. But to your point, I totally agree with you because of the fact that we're looking at a Dracula who is very much. Who's very much aware of his powers, and he leans on them quite a lot. Yeah. And what I will say too, because in Bram Stoker's Dracula, we see him occasionally turn into this like giant demonic bat figure who kind of occasionally pops out every now and then, but he's very much comfortable in human form. Mm-hmm. With this one, you kind of get a Jekyll and Hyde situation where he can kind of shapeshift at will, right?
Yeah.
I also I would also make the argument too that that with this movie you also get this feeling that this is a character who very much has this he's very much someone who you need to root against because they make it very clear this is someone who's got a huge army behind him. So so right off the bat, he's a villain. Then he's got the big creepy castle, so that's also that's also a sign for, hey, this is the villain too. And then most importantly is the fact that he's able to mind control people at will, because in other iterations of Dracula, he's usually got the one guy. He's got Renfield, right? Whereas here he's got Igor. He's got all these little, I guess, leather-clad little people running around doing all these things. I will also say too, because I do want to say that in terms of Van Helsing, this one is much more action oriented, and I will admit I really, really liked it. I
Yeah.
thought, go get him, Hugh Jackman. Like like you can really rally behind Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing, but but I'll also say this too, because when you look at the way that Dracula is portrayed in Van Helsing, you also there's also a bit of curiosity about him because they hint about his past, and you come to find out that he is actually from the same family as Kate Beckinsale's character.
Mhm.
And the whole family's mission is to basically restore their honor by basically killing off the black sheep of the family. What did you think about that that little plot twist?
So I did think it was interesting to like trace back the lineage of, honestly, to go back to Underworld. I don't know how familiar you are with those, but in the Underworld movies, you've got I think his name's Alexander Corvinus, is like the immortal, the or like original immortal, and he has two
Right, yeah,
sons,
two sons,
one
yeah.
bitten by bat, one bitten by wolf. So it's really cool in that sense that you can trace the lineage of the lichens and the vampires to the same lineage, the same parents, same family. In this, I like the fact that you've got those kind of intertwined with each other. It's not quite the same, but it's, I think, going in that direction. I do really like that you've got the lichens and the or werewolves sometimes in this movie, and the vampires. I thought, I'm not gonna lie, the story beat about trying to kill off the one family member, I was like, it's fine. Ultimately, I think it would have been perfectly fine to just say, this is big bad guy, he wants to kill her because she's a threat to him. Okay, I could have rolled with that. Adding the family side of it, I think it's fine as a story beat. It didn't really do a lot for me. I think it helped to pit them against each other, but I mean, he'd already gone after her brother, and she more or less swore eternal vengeance. So I feel like we've already got the impending battle we need.
Right. That was all the motivation she needed. You really didn't need to add that extra level in there. But I would also say too, because in terms of the way that the character is portrayed, he's very much the kind of character who, while you can say, yeah, he's very much, a one-sided villain. There's not much to him. He just wants to, put the world in eternal darkness, and he's got his brides flying around. What I also find interesting is the fact that he's also obsessed with trying to bring life to his I guess you can call them kids. I don't know what you can call those things.
I think kids is good, because I will say that this is it's an interesting character point with him, is that he is very like heartbroken when his kids get, spoiler alert, destroyed at the end. He's very upset when his brides died. Like, it seems not just as a anger that I lost a minion. It seems like I think the brides are crying over them at some point.
Yeah, they
so
are.
It's like there is a surprising amount of, at the very least, affection, if not genuine love here. So I thought that was very interesting, that we get probably the most outwardly, like, intentionally evil version of Dracula in this, but you do also get to see the softer side, the more lovey-dovey side. Okay, maybe not lovey-dovey. That word's maybe going a little too far.
Well, well, maybe paternal, because he does, because he is working in the interest of trying to preserve his lineage, right? And the fact that his children are being harmed, or Van Helsing is trying to destroy them, it kind of, if you're a parent, you could sort of understand where he's coming from, right?
Yeah. I will also say this movie honestly might have my favorite portrayal of Frankenstein's monster.
That's true. Because
there's just something about him that it breaks my heart, because he's just so sad. And first off, to get to hear him like outwardly speak, like openly speak, you're like, okay, yeah, of course this character is going to have some sad stuff. Also, random side note, the guy that plays the Frankenstein's monster is a professional opera singer. He's also in The Greatest Showman for like 2 seconds. But I really like him and his portrayal. The guy playing Igor is the guy who played Benny in The Mummy. I always forget his name, but he is so funny. He's just one of the funniest character actors out there. And yeah, this movie, I also really enjoy the transformations that they've got into the vampire forms, and then the lichen or the werewolf transformations. They're very scary looking, not just because
he's ripping the skin off.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, the first time I saw it, I was like, holy shit, this is intense, man. A lot of movies would either show that off screen, or I mean, you do get every now and then like American Werewolf in London level. I say every now and then, that one time where you get like that level of transformation. But
or the Howling,
Yes. Yeah. Oh God, dude. Yes, we could do a whole episode on just werewolf transformations and movies.
I mean, we're saving that for around the fall. So, so keep your schedule free. We will be doing an episode on werewolves at some point.
Yeah, and this movie also does deal a little bit with, there's a difference between a werewolf and a lichen about being able to control your urges and your transformations and whatnot. But I think the werewolves in this look really good. I like that they're a genuine threat. Van Helsing by himself with his, because when you said steampunk earlier, that's the most accurate freaking representation of like the level of technology these guys are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Van Helsing by himself is a very genuine threat. I mean, I believe he kills Mr. Hyde in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Well, he chops off his arm, and then he ends up falling to his death in front of Notre Dame.
Yeah, and we've got that. We've got Frankenstein's monster, but even just in regular Van Helsing form, dude, this dude is a threat. He is very knowledgeable. He's quick. He's a good shot. And then when he becomes in his werewolf form, I really like that he is still such a threat to Dracula, because it would be so easy to have that level of power of Dracula just be like, yeah, I'm just going to get rid of whatever's in front of me. But no, Van Helsing is such a good foil to him.
Well, I was going to say, I think what this movie does is kind of take that foil to the extreme, right? Because originally the idea is to have a human who's very knowledgeable going against something that's eternal.
Yeah.
But with Van Helsing. And tell me what you think of this. Do they hint at the fact that Van Helsing himself has long lived?
That is something I was actually curious about this last time, because I think I just know him as Faramir, but the guy that's with him, I feel like he has a line at some point that makes you think that maybe Van Helsing's been around a lot longer than you might think.
Because Dracula even hints at this, that hey, you were the one who killed me originally.
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. I would need to rewatch it with that in mind, but I feel like maybe the last time I watched it, I caught that there was a line at some point in time, and I was like, maybe he's older than I think he is, or maybe we're dealing with a reincarnation situation again.
Right.
But yeah, that I'm not 100% sure about that one.
Well, that's the thing too, because because the way that they portray Van Helsing, he's when he's in werewolf form, you also get the fact, you get the notion that he's very much in control. Unlike, the previous werewolf thrall, the brother who's basically, a mindless creature. Van Helsing, when he's turned into a lichen, he very much knows what his mission is, and he's very much focused on it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really interesting too, because that also speaks to just how, to your point, just how focused Van Helsing is in accomplishing his mission, regardless of what form he takes. And I will say this too. What I really, really liked is the fact that you could see Dracula split screen, well, not split screen, but he's split between his human and his bat persona. And you also get the feeling that when he's in bad form, he kind of allows himself a little more leeway than if he's in human form.
Yeah, I think like the power wise, this is probably one of the most powerful on-screen Draculas that we've seen. The only one I can think of that might get pretty up there is from Dracula Untold.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, he's cutting down armies like it's nothing, but for the most part, it's just like strength, speed, and then to be able to turn into the bats, like the swarm of bats almost. I think this is probably, in Van Helsing, I think this is probably, like, I would argue maybe the most powerful Dracula we've seen on screen.
Well, also, too, I think this is the only iteration where we see he actually has an army with him as well.
Yeah, that's true.
To a degree. I mean, we can talk about Van Helsing all the time, but we got to keep moving here. Next movie I want to look at is The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Yes. And this movie caught me by surprise. And I was, when I initially saw the trailer, I was like, what exactly can they do with this one segment from the novel and turned
Right.
that into a movie. But the way they executed it, I thought I genuinely enjoyed it. And I was genuinely, there were moments where I just kind of gripped my armchair because I'm like, man, like, don't go in that hole, man, don't go in that hole.
No, God, no.
It's survival horror at its best because you're out at sea.
Yep.
You don't know what you're doing, and what I really find interesting is at the very beginning is when they're moving all the stuff into the hole. All the sailors who were recently recruited are like, no, they see the seal and they're like, no, fuck this, I'm out of here. Keep your money. I'm good, bro. Like, you do you. I'm just gonna go back and like gamble away. Like,
the rare smart character in a horror movie.
Yeah. But what were your thoughts on this one? Because out of all the Dracula movies here, this is one where we seldom see the character.
Yeah.
It's more of building up the atmosphere, and then when he strikes, it's almost one of those things where you kind of have to freeze frame just to see it.
Yeah.
We're mostly seeing the aftermath of what he does, but the level of dread and terror that you get, it's like it starts to sink in after a while when they're like, yeah, there really is something going on here, and there is no way for us to get off the ship. Like,
yeah, this movie, first off, is a remarkably well-made movie.
mm-hmm.
It would have been so, because when I went into this, I'm going to be real honest, I went into this for for two very specific actors, because I love Corey Hawkins and I love Liam Cunningham.
Mm-hmm.
I love those two people. Heard they were in this, sold. But when I remember especially seeing the trailer, I was a little nervous. I was like, is this movie just going to be like dark the whole time? Because that is a very common thing in particularly horror movies, where you've got something that is unique looking, or a monster you want to kind of hide the bits of. You just make it really dark, and you're like, yeah, you can kind of see it. So I was. It
becomes a cliche almost.
Yeah, I was really nervous. I was like, God, are they just going to make this so dark that you can't see anything? No, they don't do that. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a very good showing of. Yeah, have you ever heard the story about Jaws and how they were going to have the shark in it much more often, but the animatronic kept messing up?
I heard about that. Yeah.
So then it became this thing where you had the presence of the creature without necessarily seeing the creature. This movie is, I think it's probably the most well done I've seen that since Jaws. He is such a constant presence. You do see him, but it's not, you don't see him so much that you lose the effect of how terrifying he is or how horrific he looks, because this is the most animalistic that we've seen. I think this is the most animalistic I've ever seen.
Right, right, and he only speaks once in the movie too. That's what I think is so remarkable. And to your point, because the thing is that when we think of Dracula, we think of him as this urbane, aristocratic character who can go into high society in London and have a conversation, talk about, oh, I see you purchased Carfax Abbey, what brings you to England, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. and you would be none the wiser, because if you saw Gary Oldman like hanging out, like in the ballroom, like you wouldn't be afraid to approach him. Even the Dracula Van Helsing is still familiar, right? Yeah. But here, this is a completely foreign character. Like, in terms of foreign, I mean non-human. He doesn't. It doesn't meet our expectations of who we expect Dracula to be, and I think that's what makes this portrayal all the more better, because we get to see a different side of him. Yeah,
and this one, there's some knockout acting in this, because it is automatically scarier because they can't leave. They're on a ship in the middle of the ocean. The daytime versus nighttime transitions, I think, are great. You really get to see these characters just like become more and more terrified as they go on, because they start to realize, like, I don't know if we can stop this. This is just such a powerful source of evil on this ship, and we're just people. There's a lot of great acting where they think they've got a plan, they think it's going to work, and then it doesn't, and then okay, we've got to pivot from that. There are some great special effects. The fire scene in this, oh my, I will say that took me by surprise. That was,
I mean, chef's kiss, like,
yeah, like that, my God, that was good. And then I think like the big reveal where it's him on the ship at night and the wings open up, and oh my God, such a good shot. But yeah, this movie, I of the other up to this point, this is easily the most definitive horror movie that we've talked about. And yeah, the most animalistic version only speaks one line, and just you get the sense of dread. And this one, I think, really you get to focus on the people around Dracula and what they go through, as opposed to a big focus on Dracula as a character. In this, he's not necessarily the focus of the story. He's just he's the antagonist of the story, and we get to spend time with the human side, really trying to figure out how they're gonna, if not beat him, at the very least survive him.
I mean, but that's the thing, because we know how the story is going to end anyway.
Yeah.
But another thing too, is the fact that is the fact that I think they did a pretty good job in kind of showing him sparingly too, because because it's not so much about the character as it is about the aura of the character, right? It's just when they say, your reputation precedes you, I think this movie definitely highlights that. And especially when you have that girl who's talking about, I'm basically like, a human larder for this guy. Like, he just feeds on me, and my village sacrificed me so they, so he won't bother them. You kind of get hints that he is an intelligent character, like someone that you could bargain with, but when you actually see him, you're like, I don't know how you can reason with this thing.
Right, dude. Like, it is crazy that every time I think of Dracula, I do think of a person, like a person-shaped thing. And
someone's capable of speech also.
Yeah. I seriously, I imagine a person with sharp teeth. I do not imagine what he is in this. This is not the version of Dracula that I think of. I will say I was a little surprised at how many people saw this movie and did not know this was part of the Dracula story.
Yeah, like that's what struck me too. I'm like,
they had no idea what this was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to be here, because we have seen shots of the ship transporting Dracula, but people have never really put the two together. That's so. I guess I could sort of understand where they're coming from, but I think to take that one. Because just like with Van Helsing, where they took like a single character from the novel and kind of expanded on the story, I think what they did here was brilliant. And I think, and to your point, I think out of all of the movies, this is like a genuinely good horror movie. Like, I was also concerned that either the movie was going to be too short because it just wasn't an idea they were going to be able to make a truly full-length movie out of, or they were going to try too hard, go on the opposite end, and it was going to be too long and really boring. And I think this one hit the sweet spot. I kind of wish people regarded this movie a bit better. It feels like this one sort of came and went, and a few people liked it, but I don't really hear a lot of people talk about it. I thought it was great. I will say also, this was a movie that, because I've seen it in theaters and I've seen it just here in my living room, seeing this in theaters was such a different experience. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Because especially when the storms are raging and you've got the thunder and lightning effects and you've got the giant boomings. Hell yeah, dude. This movie was so good to see in theaters.
Well, I was going to say too, because, because of the fact that they're on a ship, and they're experiencing all these storm swells, you kind of get the feeling that this is Dracula's environment. Like, he is in his element, because this is someone who very much, finds himself. He's basically at a buffet, basically. And
I mean, yeah, he's pretty much like, you guys literally locked all of my food in here with me. Appreciate it. Big thumbs up.
Yeah. So my big thanks is I'll eat you guys last, basically.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, the one thing that's really, really haunting is the eyes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, and I thought out of all the portrayals of Dracula, those eyes in Demeter, oh my God, they're haunting. Like,
yeah, this movie has so many moments that just because I will say the movie we're going to talk about next has a lot of them as well, that there are just a lot of moments where there's just the imagery, them on fire, the zoom in of the eyes, him with his wings up and like this lightning flashes behind him. There are so many moments that are so freaking iconic in a movie that takes place in basically one location.
It's a bottle episode, basically.
Yeah, dude, that was so good. God, this was so good. Also, great creature actor Javier Botet is the one doing the Dracula-ness. I was like, man, that poor guy has gone through more prosthetic applications in his life than almost any other 10 people.
Yeah, even more than Doug Jones.
I was like, he and Doug Jones are the two that, like, God, the amount of time those guys have spent in makeup chairs.
But I mean, the payoff is so amazing. And I was going to say at the very end, when Clemens is at the pub and we see Dracula, I'm thinking, oh, so now we get to see him in human form. No, is just a bat in a top hat and a coat.
Yep. Yeah. I will say I was pleasantly surprised that not everyone bit the dust in this. I read Dracula many years ago, and for the most part, they talk about the Demeter, and you get most of the story from the captain's journal, captain's log.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get the postmortem for pretty much what happened. So it from him, unless he was the last survivor, you're not expecting anyone to survive. So I was very pleasantly surprised that my dude made it out of this movie. Hopefully movie alive, but at the very least off the ship.
Right, but we know he's not going to be the one who ends up killing Dracula at the end. So this leads us into our last movie, which is Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, which just came out last year. Now, I was going to say because I'd seen Werner Herzog's 1979 classic, and and the Herzog version is a bit more. It's more of a closet drama, really. It's not as expansive here. It's like Robert Eggers just takes what Herzog did and dials it up to 13, right? And I would say out of all the iterations, because we looked at Gary Oldman's Dracula as the most human, Van Helsing's Dracula is very much the villain, Javier Botet is very much the most animalistic. Bill Skarsgard gives us a very foreign Dracula, and I was going to say, like, the thing that strikes me the most is the mustache and the way that he looks. He looks like a Hungarian nobleman.
100%. Yeah, going into this, I had heard that they were going to do, I don't remember exactly how they phrased it, but it was like they did something drastic to alter his appearance, and I was like, I'm very curious of what it is. And then as soon as I saw the mustache, at first I'm like, oh, that looks horrible. And then 10 seconds later, I'm like, no, this works. This really works for me. And then with especially mixed with the accent, the clothing choices that he has, everything. Oh my God, it worked so much better than I thought it was going to.
Now with the Nosferatu story, as you'll probably know, originally when it was made in the 20s, they were basically making it without the permission of the Stoker estate.
Yeah.
So as a result, they, instead of setting it in merry old England like all other adaptations, they had to set it in Wisborg, Germany. But I think it speaks to just how universal the Dracula story is, because you don't necessarily need to have it set in England for it to be a Dracula tale.
Yeah.
Now, what I really like about this version here is the fact that out of all the movies that we've seen, I think this one is the most gothic of them all.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah.
I mean, Bradley, you and I could go hours and hours just talking about the aesthetics of it. But I will say, like, everything from the way that the dress, the lighting, the shots, everything, it's very much natural lighting. You don't get the sense that there's anything Hollywood about it, if I can use that phrase. So what are your thoughts about Bill Skarsgard's character as Nosferatu and the way that he interacts with the character? Because unlike the other iterations where it's Van Helsing versus Dracula, Van Helsing really doesn't play that much of a role. Really, it's more focused on the heroine.
Yeah. This version, there is one particular line in this movie that I love more than I can properly put into words, is when he says, she calls him a monster. She says, you're a something, and he's like, I'm not a monster, I'm just an appetite. And that's good. That's good shit. That is good shit right there. That's a good ass line.
Robert Eggers.
Yeah, dude. Oh God, I love Eggers. I will say I haven't seen The Northman yet. I need to, but I have watched The Lighthouse so many times.
Well, I was gonna say, Bradley, I'm gonna be doing a review of The Northman with a Shakespeare scholar, and we're gonna be talking about how Alexander Skarsgård probably played the best version of Hamlet so far, because it is based on the legend of Hamlet, which would later become Hamlet.
Yeah. This first off, I'm very excited for that. Yeah, this version, yeah, if you didn't know, it's kind of like when they make a movie and then they make almost like a knockoff movie where instead of like Bradley the main character, the second one is like it's Brandon the main character.
Yeah.
Nosferatu is a little like that for the origin of Dracula. It is very much a different interpretation of the same type of story. So there are a lot of things that are very similar. There are some that are different. We very consistently think of the vampires biting the neck. In Nosferatu, they bite the chest, which it would in a way make sense because it's over the heart, and the symbolism part of it is a bit more like that. And then this version, we do get to see he's got some of the animalistic qualities. He's got some of the suaveness. He's got some of the unknown. He's just sort of a mixture of a lot of the things we've talked about so far, but at the same point in time, he is like his own thing. This movie also does a really cool job of showing some of the, I really think when he gets to the town that is, and I think they use this phrase in the movie, I think it's like the gypsies, where they are when he's going to the castle. And
are talking about the scene where Hutter witnesses the staking scene.
Yes. Okay. That was where I was the whole time I'm watching. I was like, I am not aware of this. I don't know what exactly it is they're doing. I'm not like familiar with it, but it's so obvious what they're doing, and it's like clearly it works. They get the guy, but it's so interesting to just get to see this totally different interpretation of this thing where immediately you're like, okay, there are new rules here. There's some different stuff going on. You do still have some of the things about when he travels and can't be away from the dirt. We do still have that part of the story. The way that the story ends is still similar to the original Nosferatu. It's slightly gorier.
Yeah. Like, well, I was gonna say, this Nosferatu loves to eat. Like when he eats, like he eats. Like, but to go back to your point earlier about the Roma when they do that staking, that was a tradition that's been ongoing. And I remember watching. Have you ever seen that documentary show Secrets of the Dead? It used to come on PBS all the time. There was an episode where they actually interviewed people in Romania, and this was like from the early 2000s, and they were interviewing this guy who is a professional vampire hunter, families will actually pay money to go into the graveyard, open up the graves, and stake or put traps in the graves to make sure that their loved ones don't come back.
Oh, God, that's cool.
I'll find the link because I know it's on YouTube. I'll find the link and I'll send it to you because that's because when I saw that scene, I was like, he's tapping into something that people still believe in to this very day. It's not and it's not something that people just do willy-nilly. This is a tradition that's based out of genuine fear. And what you get with Nosferatu is there's an atmosphere of genuine fear and the fallout that it causes, because we see what later on what happens is, we see the plague of rats. We see the Renfield character going batshit crazy and just creating like a Solomonic circle to try to summon his master. We see what happens to Hutter's friend, where he loses his wife and his kids, and then he ends up killing himself in the mausoleum. So, to your point, not only is he an appetite, but he's a disease. He is the embodiment of disease. Yeah,
this it was so interesting because there were so many things I saw in this, and I was like, I didn't really the idea of the plague and spreading that in this movie's version of the Demeter, the ship that carries him across. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, his friend, Jesus, dude. This movie's got some seriously horrific shit in it. When his friend's wife has the rats that are like gnawing on her.
Oh God.
Oh no. And then okay, this is gonna sound fucked up at first, but I love horror movies. There are a few taboos that you don't tend to break, and every time a movie does, I have to respect it. If you kill a kid in your movie, there's a certain level that I'm like, I have to respect that, because that is not something you do very often. Man, this movie kills some kids. I mean, like straight up.
Well, to be fair, I mean, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, you see a baby get eaten, and then we see Toby in Last Voyage of the Demeter kind of get bitten as well, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, what we see in Nosferatu, that's like, I mean, it just takes it to a whole nother level, and you're like, yeah, this is
Yeah,
like,
when they open the door and you see him with the kid, you're like, oh, he's gonna save. Oh no, shit, that kid's dead. Oh my god, never mind.
both of them, by the way, both of them.
Yeah, yeah, both kids. The one, God, man, this dude. There are so many moments in Nosferatu. The when Hutter is going to the castle and the carriage meets him in the woods. That is one of the best shots I've ever seen in a movie.
Oh,
It
totally.
was stunning. I just could not get over how good that looked. The image of his hand, the shadow going out over the city. I'm like, this is so fucking cool, man. If there's one thing that Eggers just gets unbelievably well, it is just like the symbols and the imagery. He just nails it.
I mean, but that's the thing, because I think out of all the directors, I think Eggers is the one who truly appreciates and understands, the vampiric lore, and more specifically, the lore of Dracula.
Yeah.
And I will give him props, because because instead of making another Dracula adaptation, he adapts Nosferatu, and I think that works well for him, because it gives him a bit more freedom, a bit more license to kind of explore things in a way that the other Dracula directors haven't, right?
Yeah, that's fair, because a lot of other ones, it's if they are either going to go with what we know and then it's familiar, or they're going to intentionally try to go against what we know to make something more unique. Whereas when you've got a character more like Nosferatu, you automatically got a lot more freedom, because he's not as iconic as Dracula. Not as many people know about Orlok. Not as many people are super familiar. So you automatically get a lot more freedom with, yes, he is a vampire. Yes, we know a lot of things about vampires, but Eggers still gets all of this freedom to play with what he wants to play with. Certain parts of lore he really wants to show, and other parts he wants to be like, well, you thought this may have been a Dracula character, but really I'm going to do it this way instead.
Right, but it's still, but the story beats and the way the character interacts, it's still familiar to us, even if it's not, Dracula in name. So I want to go ahead and bring this discussion to a conclusion, because, like I said, we can go on for hours and hours. But
the only other one thing I wanted to add, I had to look up the character's name. Freaking Willem Dafoe in this movie as, no wonder I didn't remember his name, Alban Eberhard von Franz. He is one of the greatest characters in the history of cinema, because this dude smokes a lot of opium. He loves his cats, and the scene towards the end where like they're setting the ground on fire and he's like laughing maniacally while the fires rage and the rats go around him. I'm like, dude, Willem Dafoe is having the time of his life in this movie.
Well, that's the thing, because whereas Hugh Jackman gives us a very rational, action-packed, Van Helsing, where we know, we can root for him and we know what his mission is. With Von Franz, you don't really know what he's up to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because that's the thing, because you don't really know if he's just as crazy as the Renfield character, or if this is someone that you can really trust. So it's kind of like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, place your bets, and whatever happens happens.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting take on a character, because he is on the side of, I guess you would say, good in this movie, but at the same point in time,
good in quotes. Let's put it that way.
I was like, at the same point in time, though, ultimately his plan does involve having a woman sacrifice herself. So there's a certain level of sacrificing one life to save how many. And then when the final scene, when Nosferatu does die, man, that is some freaking top-notch gore, man.
I mean, the last time I saw a carcass like that was when I was watching Bear Grylls. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, holy shit! Like, Eggers really when he does a movie project, he puts, he goes all in. Like, he doesn't skimp.
Yeah.
It's very in your face. Like, I would say, out of all the movies, like, I think Orlok here is the personification of death itself.
Oh yeah, 100%. He even looks like it. Like, he literally, there are parts of him you're like, I can't tell if he's rotting or if he needs a shower or both.
Well, when you open the coffin, I mean, you kind of wonder, like, is that flesh, or is just that the way his bones are bleached? Like,
yeah.
So I want to go ahead and just wrap it up. So we've looked at 4 movies here, and we've discussed different aspects of the Dracula character. So I want to ask you, Bradley, um, out of the different portrayals of Dracula in these 4 movies, which one would you say kind of best captures who Dracula is as a character in pop culture?
I Between the 4 that we discussed, I mean, I've got to say Gary Oldman's portrayal in Bram Stoker's Dracula. I think that is when we think of the Dracula character. Once you're not including Bela Lugosi, because that is just
Yeah.
cheating. That's just going to
Yeah.
be the version.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think Gary Oldman's version is the one that is the closest to that character, while still bringing something new and a different version to it. All the other versions, I think, are very different takes of it, but I feel like Gary Oldman's is still, I would say, the closest to the definitive version of Dracula of the 4 that we discussed. I would say his, is the closest.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be a contrarian, as I always am, and I'm going to say Bill Skarsgard actually does a pretty good job in capturing the spirit of Dracula.
That's fair.
And my reason is this, because when we think of Dracula, based on the popular perception, we're thinking of someone who very much taps into the powers of evil and the powers of death and darkness, and brings about all these horrible things, which motivates the characters to fight back. And as much as I love Gary Oldman's portrayal of a very human Dracula, I feel Bill Skarsgård kind of gives us what we would expect out of Dracula, someone who is a mysterious figure that we really don't know anything about. And what makes Bill Skarsgård so compelling as Orlok, and in turn Dracula, is the fact that this is someone that you don't really quite know what to make of him, because on the one hand, he looks and sounds like a person, but at the same time, he's death itself, as we've mentioned before. So, I would definitely say that Bill Skarsgård, for me, is the best personification of Dracula. But let us know down in the comments below, who do you think best portrayed Dracula in all these 4 movies? And if you have any other ideas or any other characters you would like us to take a look at, let us know down in the comments below. But for Myth, Magic, and Movies, thanks for tuning in. And check out Story Proof Podcast. These guys are amazing. Catch you on the next one.